What's up, guys? Today we are going to be doing a starter plate install. Oh, here it is, lost it. One of these guys. So pretty much my car, when I bought it, the ignition tumbler was out. If you guys pay attention to the rest of the videos on the channel, you probably know this already, but the starter tumbler went out, and it's a really expensive fix on BMWs, and I know it's really common, and it happens on other people's cars too. So this is a generally universal fix for that. That's actually really cheap. That starter plate that I got, or the switch plate, was only like $25 on Amazon, and it's actually really nice too. Like, all the switches are really notchy. This is metal, not plastic like I was thinking. I originally thought it was plastic, and I was just gonna get a cheap one for now. So, you know, really solid stuff from Amazon, at least for that. And it doesn't have to be crazy nice or anything. And then I went out and got 14 gauge wire, some butt connectors, and then the spade connectors, the ones that have like little U on them. It might not be called spade. I might have just totally butchered that, but I don't know. So, first thing we did, well, we already pulled apart all of this stuff. I have an E36. If you need to know how to pull this apart, just look up another YouTube video. We're not going in depth on that stuff. We're going more in depth on this stuff. So I had where did it go? Boom. Ignition switch. And what happened, will it focus? What happened originally was I would just have the ignition switch hanging down here by all of these little wires, run it through my key sensor, and then just turn the car over with this. This was a pretty easy workaround, and it's a temporary fix, but like literally this morning, I ripped one of these wires out just because this is hanging here. I had to rewire it, and like this was just a pain, especially if I stalled. I stalled like once when I first got the car, just because I was still getting used to it, and it's just kind of shitty to like have to go over here and turn this thing over. It works, but it's not a good permanent fix, so this is actually a really solid permanent fix. So basically what I did, I cut all the wires. These are all the wires. We're gonna pull them out a little bit more and get them all stripped, and get some butt connectors up in there, and then get our 14 gauge wire, and then get some long strips so we can run it over to here. I'm planning on putting the switch plate inside this guy. Will it focus at all? There we go. Right up in here, kind of like that, more or less. We're gonna have to do some cutting because it doesn't totally fit with this big switch back here, but later on in the video, we'll get really in depth on like what all of these little connectors do. It's really just not wanting to focus. But we'll get into what all of these do, which ones you need, which ones you don't need. Putting a diagram up of the wiring for the ignition switch for my E36. It'll have like all colors and stuff. I'll show you right now. Yeah, so we're using that to kind of have a general idea of how to wire it up, so we'll get more in depth once we start actually doing all the wiring. So, I just finished wiring, can I see that? Yeah, fine. So I just finished wiring the power for the switch plate. Let's see if I can get this camera looking better. Lighting is terrible. There we go. So I just finished wiring this. You a little tired? Carry on. Anyways, so I just finished wiring. So this is what I got. So basically, this is the front of it. So what I did was I already got these guys in there, the terminals. I had to bend this one because it needed to clear this. But I had main power coming.
Hey, we're vlogging here.
So I got, this is where the main power is gonna go. You guys can see on the diagram. What's gonna happen is this is gonna feed power through this accessory on the ignition switch, the third one, and then we're running that straight over to accessory, and then we have another, so we got two bolted in the same one. That's gonna jump over to run, and then the run is gonna jump right over to the power for the actual starter. So this is just all the pre-wiring getting done. I got all these wires. Make sure you guys are using the correct gauge wire for this too. I only got at first 14 gauge wiring for the whole thing, and then found out that my run wire and my constant power wire were both 10 gauge. So I went out and bought some more 10 gauge wire and bigger terminals to support all that. So the yellow terminals are for 12 to 10 gauge wire. the blue terminals are for 14 to 16. So make sure you guys are using the right gauge terminals and the right gauge wires. If you want to play it safe, just use 10 gauge all around. That won't hurt it because the electricity is still going to go through the 10 gauge wire. If it's a 14 from the car, it's not going to make a difference, but it is going to make a difference if you use 14 gauge wire running off of a 10 gauge wire that's in the car. So just make sure to double check your wires. Wired into the wires that we need from the ignition switch. So now we're gonna run all these through up under here, run them out, and then get them all hooked up. And then once it's all through there, we can start attaching everything. So we'll get back to you guys when we got all this stuff wired in. We followed this diagram for the wires. Make sure you know what wires you're using. And I actually labeled most of them. I didn't put that in the video on accident, but I labeled them because that way I knew when I was running the wires from the ignition wiring harness to under the dash, I knew exactly what wires I was using because they all look the same once you use the same wire on them. So I would definitely recommend doing that just so you can kind of keep yourself organized. And then that way you also know which wires to put where so you can get the correct starting sequence. Because if you don't do that, I don't know if it wouldn't work, to be totally honest, but I would just do it in the correct sequence anyways because it makes way more sense. And here's the E36 wiring diagram again. I don't know what your car is. If it's not an E36, it could be completely different. It's probably completely different. Usually wires are different colors in different cars. Same thing with car stereos. It's a pain. You just got to look up online which wires do what, and then you can figure it out. I actually had 2 extra wires that were for the dinger that dings when you put the key into the ignition, and something else. I don't know what it meant, but I did the research. I knew I only needed accessory, power, starter, ground, and run. And so those are the only ones I ran with. So just double check, make sure you know what wires you're putting into the ignition switch. Otherwise, it's gonna be a mess.
We're back, everybody. Just plopped in the battery after wiring in everything.
Nothing's happening.
Well, don't you have to say the keys in the car first?
Keys in the car?
But don't you have to
Oh.
say-
Stupid ass. Oh, we got a light.
Oh, hello.
That didn't do anything. All right, so we got to figure out this start, but I mean, everything else works. After this, we quickly found out that on the ignition switch that I got, there are 2 sets of terminals on the start button. There's one on the lower part and one on the upper part. The upper part is a big relay for the starter, and I didn't realize that they were there even, and I was just kind of guessing. But we did quickly find out the only reason this didn't start the first time was because I put them in the lower terminals for the starter button. So as soon as I put them in the correct terminals, this happened. All right, we're gonna try again. Hopefully this one works. So let's try this. Accessory. Run. Hey! Oh, yo! Oh my god!
Start, what the fuck?
Yo! It works. Oh, yo! That's so filthy. All right, guys, that's about it. Starter ignition switch is dope. I just played around with it a little bit, drove it around, and everything works perfectly now. I do think this coming week I'm gonna go get a new switch because the one issue I ran into is that ignition switch that had a little light on it won't turn off, and I don't want it to be a power draw, but I'm even more concerned that like it's really bright, so if someone walks by my car at night, maybe they'll see the light on, they'll be like, oh, maybe we break into this guy's car, even though it won't work. Also, just so you guys know, there was a relay that came with it, with the ignition switch. You do need that if you don't have a relay that's built into your starter solenoid. I do have one, so I didn't have to worry about that, but definitely just do your research. Make sure that you don't need that relay, because if you do, you definitely want to use that because you could literally start a fire with the wires. It's a whole thing, but I don't, so I'm chilling. And most cars I think do come with the relays and the starters, so just double check, make sure. So I will see you guys next week.